When we hear gospel stories, it is important to remember that after the resurrection of Jesus, many years passed before the gospels were written. And the resurrection stories, and in fact, all of the gospel stories, were originally passed down by word of mouth within the community. Today's story tells us about what happened after Jesus had joined two disciples who were on their way to a village outside of Jerusalem. What they heard that morning about the women's report that Jesus was alive was apparently not important enough for them to stick around and try to find out more about it. Their hope of Jesus setting Israel free from the Romans was also dashed. They despaired. Then Jesus came along and walked with them, but they only recognized him later when he broke the bread with them. By the time this story was told within the community, the Eucharist would have become an already customary ritual practice. The earliest Christians would have begun to understand that there's a connection between the Eucharist and the cross. Like the grains of wheat that died and became new life as bread, or like the grapes of the vine that were pressed and became new life as wine, so also Jesus died and became new life in a new resurrected body. The disciples put it together when Jesus made the gesture of breaking the bread with them at the meal they shared. Jesus must have looked somehow different in his resurrected body and somewhat the same. We recall that Mary thought he was the gardener when she went to the tomb, that these two disciples on the road didn't recognize him until he broke the bread with them. And we heard in today's story that his resurrected body was able to pass through closed doors. A heresy developed in the early church called Docetism. People who adhered to that believed that Jesus was God with a human appearance. That's why there was a lot of attention to Jesus' actions that showed that he was not a ghost. And so we heard in today's gospel how he invited the disciples to touch him, see his hands and feet, and he even invited them to give him something to eat. Luke's gospel was written near the end of the first century. By that time, the community was beginning to be concerned about the delay of the second coming of Christ. Their earlier expectations that he would be back any day now were not coming to fulfillment. What were they supposed to do until Jesus came again? St. Luke gives an answer using Jesus' own words when he says that all they have to do is proclaim the good news and be his witnesses. And how does that happen? What matters is that we, his followers, embody the presence of the risen Christ and give witness to his message of love, forgiveness, and reconciliation. Love one another, care for each other, sacrifice for each other. Then we will know that God is with us, and we do not need to be afraid of anything, not even death, for there is no death in God, only the transition from life to life. In the end, there is only love, only peace, only grace. These are the gifts we have received, and they are not just for ourselves, but to share with each other.